Lights on, maybe she thinks we're ready. Oh, but she's got to come back out. Here she comes.
7th and 8th, I think it was it 3 years or 4 years? 7th and 8th. But that's a lot of kids you got to transport. And you're not going to bless.
But anyway, it was a nice night. It really was.
Call the meeting to order of the Washington Planning and Zoning Commission for Monday, March 11th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Tony Gokenbach, Mark Hydrich.
Here.
Mark Leisner, Mark Piontek,
Here.
Tom Holtmeyer.
Here.
Sandy Lucy,
Here.
John Boardman,
Here.
Chuck Watson,
Here.
Samantha Wacker,
Here.
Carolyn Witt,
Here.
Sal Maniaci.
Here. Mike. Please rise for a pledge of allegiance. Sorry for the late start, but we'll get it going here. The first item is the approval of the minutes from the February 11th, 2019 meeting. If you've had a chance to read those, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second. Oh,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Moving on to item number 3, case number 190303. The applicant is requesting to rezone 823 East First Street from R1C Single Family Residential to C1 Commercial. Sal?
Yes, thank you. So this property, 823 East First Street, is located at the corner of East First Street and Highway 47, just south of the bridge there and just north of the hospital. The property is currently zoned, well, I should say it does have access to First Street and an alley in the back. It is an unusual alley. Our city code and our city maps show it as an alley. The plat shows it as an alley, but it essentially works as a street that doesn't meet minimum design standards because, as you can see here, all the homes to the rear actually access that alley. I think their addresses are considered Missouri Avenue. However, it's by plat, it's an actual alley. It's not a public street. But that comes into play of how they're going to get access later. And the lot in question does have dual access, and not just off 47, but from Hancock as well. Click through here. So it's zoned R1B single family residential, as is that entire block. As you can see, there is C1 directly across Highway 47. Everything that is commercially developed in that area is C1, which is our light commercial, kind of call it neighborhood commercial. There are every use that is allowed in C1 is allowed in C2, it's just C2 allows more. So the C1 and that light commercial does have a little bit less intensive uses that are allowed there. I'll let the applicant speak on this. I believe in this case it's an insurance office, but that is not where our recommendation comes from on the proposed use. Our recommendation comes from, is C1 an appropriate zoning for that parcel? And in this case, it does have access along Highway 47. It is directly in the vicinity of commercial property, and given the fact that it is if you're going to have a commercial zoning in this area directly adjoining residential development, C1 would be the appropriate zone district to go to. So we are recommending approval of this. Site plan and access is all going to be required to be approved at a later date once they actually come forward with a plan. There will be some screening requirements to the west. I apologize, I don't have it on the screen. I did put it in the packet. There is a site plan they submitted. I didn't throw up on the screen because it's actually not required for them to submit that for this type of request. This is an unplanned district, and so I didn't want to have any approval hindering on this, because this does not mean they are going to build this. We can't require them to build this. Even looking at this, there's screening in some other facilities that aren't mentioned on here, so we'll have to address that at a later date. Stormwater isn't addressed on here, but again, that does not change our recommendation because those are all items that we address before they get a building permit. So.
Any questions by board members, discussion?
Just a clarification, and those of you that have been on the commission for a while, didn't we have this approved as a C2 at one point in time?
I think it was
I
to
think
the
there's a
south
different
of that.
property. Yeah, there was
Was
a
it?
different property, because was this the one that we're talking about, spa or something?
Well, there was one
That was
directly
across the
Across.
way.
I thought
across
it
the
was
street here.
doctor's office that was.
Right.
I think to the south, those that
The-
may have
another
been here at
block.
one time.
Mhm.
The next block.
Was it before the
towards-
bridge construction?
Okay,
Wasn't
okay.
there some talk about?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
I remember the spa.
Towards.
It's
Third.
my understanding
Okay,
this
I
is
see.
fully anticipated to be, I mean, with the site plan be utilized, this is not a,
There was some discussion.
It was this block now that I see that.
And there was some discussion along in here for,
But we still show that
C4.
as residential though, don't we?
Yep.
well, there was discussion about C4.
Right, planned, that's right. I knew there was
and
something.
it could have been approved. If C4 was approved and never built upon, after 2 years, that reverts back.
2 years, okay, that's
Right,
what.
So-
yes,
And
that
it was that
whole-
long ago.
And
Yeah.
There was a larger
Yeah.
area. It wasn't just the one
Okay.
property. It was several
But it was
of the lots.
C4.
That was you're right, it was a C4.
So Sal, will there be any egress constraints to that alley to the rear, since that's coming right off of 47? Because this overhead map doesn't show the new bridge, because that house that you showed there, if you go back one slide.
Yes,
That house that you showed directly to the north.
Is
that's
gone.
not- Is gone.
right. That
So
S
that's where
curve
the
comes in right
dog
here.
leg is in the street.
No, that's correct. We don't have, I don't believe it's from the traffic committee or from the city engineer's office, have any plans to limit that access. I know it has been discussed at MoDOT. The possibility of doing ride in, ride out there, because these homes do have access to Hancock. We have not anticipated requiring that as part of this zoning. That would be, I would think, a call from MoDOT. If this is something that's high enough traffic volume and MoDOT is concerned with it, then MoDOT could require that to be ride in, ride out.
So when does that get addressed then? Because to me, after looking at it now, since the bridge is built, that's going to, and driving through there, that's going
Right.
to be a challenge. When
Well-
you're making a right-hand turn out of there with 2 lanes of traffic, the way they're coming across the new bridge, on that curve is going to be, I think, a traffic issue that somebody needs to look at.
And Piontek can correct me if I'm wrong, since I don't think we can conditionalize a rezoning for a traffic study, unless we can, and since they're not asking for a new curb cut, the only way it would get addressed is if there's complaints directly to MoDOT about it. And so it may not be addressed till after it's built,
It's similar to.
because there's no new
Madison.
curb cut.
Similar to Madison Avenue.
Yeah, if there was a new curb cut, if they were putting a new driveway access in, and they may, I don't know from their site plan, they may have to do some type of right-of-way work. If there's any work inside MoDOT or that is a public alley or right-of-way, our city engineer can hold that excavation permit is what we call it. Yeah, it's re-excavation permit, and you can hold those if there's any concern on it. But if there's no new curb cut, then there's no way for us to review it.
Am I understanding correctly, the proposed use is for an insurance office?
That's what I've been told, but again, yeah, we don't, we make a
So
recommendation based off the
intention is
district.
it probably is not going to be a real intensive
Right.
use, I would, assuming
I
that's.
Now, they
But I
would,
know what you're
they
concerned.
do have to tell us the use. At this point, you know, I questioned it just because I wanted to make sure it was the appropriate zone district. But that, again, like I said, that doesn't change our recommendation. We will have to question the use when it comes to occupancy, because that determines how many parking spaces we require. So,
Any other questions or discussion by board members? Not anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this? Come on up, introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm Melissa Huntington.
Just pull that down, thank you.
Okay. I'm saying I talk loud enough. I don't know if I need it. I own a farmer's insurance agency here in town. I'm the proposed buyer and looking to move to that area. Again, I don't see concern with a lot of traffic coming through with it, but I've even addressed this with farmers already. They like the area, they like the exposure. And I've had an agency here in Washington for about 8 years and just looking to deepen my roots into the business. Any questions?
Yeah. Questions?
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Anyone else in the audience?
Hi, I know most of you. My name's Andrea Rao. My husband and I, Mike, are owners of Overton Properties, and we are here tonight as owners of 823 East First Street. We've owned and rented this property as residential property for over 10 years. As the bridge project progressed, our existing tenant gave us notice that they would be vacating as of July of 18, and we have had no potential renters since that time. In 2015, MoDOT approached Overton Properties to request an easement for this property and the two houses to the south to 3rd Street, adjacent to 47. We were paid fair market value of around $2,000 for that easement, and then that block was later sold to Mercy, that entire block that's not really demonstrated up there, but I believe it was C4, now it reverted to C2. Right? The easement allowed MoDOT to take down multiple large oak trees that previously acted as a buffer to the property at 823 East 1st Street, making it less desirable as a residential property. During those discussions with MoDOT, I expressed interest in selling the house at 823 to allow for a wider access to the west side of the new bridge. MoDOT said they were not interested in the property, and we did not enter into any negotiations at all with MoDOT. As the barrier and roadwork began to approach our property at 823, I repeatedly visited with MoDOT representatives and even Judy Wagner at the site, expressing our concern about the southbound traffic negotiating the curb on 47 and directly to the north of our property. We were concerned about the issue of headlights, of traffic, of speed, of turn, and all that for a residential application. Again, they shared that the purchase of the property at 823 First was not in their plan and no valuation was ever discussed. And I repeat this because this is my opportunity to set the record straight and to let the public know that we did not hold up MoDOT for an outrageous price, which resulted in the extreme curves to the south end of the bridge. We feel the best use for this property is commercial. It is highly visible and accessible. Previously, we presented the block to the south to the Planning and Zoning Committee to turn it to C4. This was approved and is now C2, and that's the entire block to the south to 3rd Street. We have buyers who plan to use the property for commercial application. The properties to the east, south are commercial, and then the one to the north, I think that there is a right-of-way that MoDOT's going to keep. And I asked the city, I talked to Darren, asking if the city would be interested in this property perhaps as a staging area for the bike trails that we're so excited to have for people to cross. And they said it's not in the plan, it's not in the budget. So again, we feel the best use is commercial. We respectfully request that you approve the rezoning of this property to C1 this evening. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For the explanation.
Anyone else? There's no further discussion. Any more by the board? I'll entertain a motion.
I move we accept it, change the zoning.
There's a first.
C1.
I'll second.
First and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Goes to
Goes to council.
council.
Council next week, Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 4, case number 190304. The applicant is requesting to rezone 415 Cedar Street from R1B, single-family residential, to R3, multifamily residential. Sal?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to point out that 415 address, that's what the county has on record, and I actually double-checked today. But that is the even side of the street. And so...
Threw me for a loop.
Yeah, yeah. You got 414, you got 416, and I guess that was just a mishap. We will be correcting that. The ordinance will be by parcel number instead of address, just so you know, and then we'll make sure that's corrected. Conveniently, if this is approved, we will obviously have to readdress the entire building anyway, so it will take care of it at that time. But the applicant has submitted a rezoning request from R1B single-family residential to R3 multifamily. So it is located here on the mid-block of Cedar Street. Here's Fremont Street. This whole portion of Cedar Street is zone R1B single-family residential. I will point out that there are a number of homes, 2 for sure that actually have permits for Airbnb that have multiple units. So even though this whole street is zoned R1B single-family residential, some of them have either gotten a special use permit to operate as two-family dwelling, or the one next door, we have it on record as a 2-family. The applicant thought they thought it was a 3-family. we didn't have that on our occupancy permit, but if it's before 2007, it very well could have a third occupancy that we've never inspected. But I just wanted to point out there are multifamily uses on the street that are grandfathered or have been approved via special use. So it's not just as this red that, or this yellow that you see here. The applicants wishing to go to that R3 multifamily, that was actually after some discussions. They weren't here, able to be here tonight, but they wish to put I think their family on a single level for disability reasons, and then they were going to rent up the upstairs as a second unit. So we originally had them as an application for R2, which was just two family. That's not duplexed out. And then it was brought up that maybe in 7 years, after his son graduates and moves out of the house, that they would renovate it to 4 units. Because of that lot size, that is the maximum amount of units you could have there anyway. So, well, let's just think long-term then. Let's get you in for R3 multifamily zoning. So that's how the application kind of evolved from the original request and what the plan to do immediately to long-term. So for that R3 zoning, there is nothing in the direct vicinity for that. This property is an old Dr. Post building, thank you. Dr. Postal building, so it is an existing commercial structure surrounded by residential uses. So I think repurposing this commercial structure into a multifamily residential use is appropriate for the area, given its proximity to downtown and its proximity to mixed uses. Since this property is actually, as you can see, still zoned R1B, the applicant would, one, have to prove that there has been commercial uses in there in the past 2 years to make sure it's still grandfathered. And if not, they would have to come back in for a rezoning anyway. So I think the rezoning to that R3 is, appropriate for the area, and we do recommend approval. And I just want to also mention the reason we're not recommending any type of planned district, because even though it's great, and I'm happy that they're repurposing an existing building, even if that were in the future to be torn down, the fact that the lot size is only so big that it can only hold 4 units, I still think a 4-unit apartment building in this region is appropriate. So that's really the backbone of my recommendations, is the use itself fits into the area rather than the fact that it's an existing building. I think if they repurpose it, it just gives it a little bit more credence to the fact that it's a commercial building that will no longer be commercial in a residential street.
And obviously, it has plenty of parking for the...
Well, they'd have to prove that. And so again, that same thing where my recommendation is based on, is this use appropriate for it? They'd have to show that before they get occupancy. So for the 2 units, yeah, it'd be easy for them to show that they have parking. If they go up to 4, they're going to have to show that they have 8 parking spaces before they get occupancy. I just found out tonight that they have this property under contract as well.
Aha.
So, but that has not been requested to rezone or anything. That is a commercial lot, so if they wanted to keep it separate and have off-site parking, they could do that because it's within 300 feet. But just to not complicate things, that is not on the request, it's not on the application. This is just for the multifamily. They would have to prove that at site plan or at occupancy, if in this case where there would not be a site plan.
Sal, I got a question.
Yeah.
How does this, enlighten me, how does this work? So the applicant name is a different name than the owner.
Yeah, that happens a lot where it's for sale and the owner lets an applicant fill out the application.
Just to see if...
Yes, see if it goes through. So that is actually why, so this is on P&Z tonight, obviously. It is not on, we're going to postpone it at council because they're wanting to see, there are a number of contingencies on the sale contract. So this is one of them. Will they be able to get through zoning? There's also an inspection that has to be done. So they're going to get the inspection done, and if every other contingency is met for the buyer, the last thing is for them to go to council. They will then go to council at that point because that protects the buyer and the seller. One, there's a contingency where the buyer doesn't buy it and then it gets denied at council, and now they have this property, they can't do what they want with it. It protects the seller because if they were to get the property rezoned and then the inspection fails and the buyers back out, the owner now has a property that's been rezoned that they didn't want it in that zone. They only got it for the applicant. So we allow an applicant to fill out on behalf of the buyer, and the buyer can just give their permission.
Makes sense. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, discussion?
I read on your thing about that if it's demolished in a new apartment building, which is not a problem, except that it's a really cool historic building.
Right, and it is in the historic district, so they would have to go through Historic Preservation
Would
Commission
see.
if they went to demolish. That was not brought up at all. That was not
Right,
an
right.
option on the table.
And
I
that's
just,
not something that we would talk about here, but
Right.
I asked.
I wanted to bring that up is
Sorry.
because
Mention it.
my recommendation is based on the fact that for the parcel itself, the location, I think the use is
It's good.
appropriate.
Yeah, the use is great.
'Cause
I
we
have no
can't
problem
protect
with
the
that.
building with
We'd be
the-
glad to help them out
Right.
if they want
So-
to keep the building.
Yeah,
I
he
have
in
friends
no
who
way,
could help.
yeah, he in no way alluded to that. I just wanted to
Okay.
bring that up
Good.
because
Well, I
I knew
had to
that,
ask.
that could be a question where I could say, well, we're recommending it because it's a commercial building being repurposed.
Exactly, and I have no
But
problem
it could be
with
torn down. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, if you want to come up, introduce yourself.
My name is Jim Smith. I'm from Pacific, Missouri, 303 West Union. I'm a Realtor, and I represent the buyers. They are very conscious of the character and style of the building and are going to make every effort to keep it, the footprint the same. Some of the changes that I guess the most significant one I've heard, they have a severely handicapped son, and they're going to need a ramp either in back or in the front. But it's a big building, a lot of space, and the lower level it has basic utilities down there, and it shouldn't be, they don't feel just too big a step to make it habitable and live. They have not bought any more property. In fact, he called me to ask me to be careful how I described what they're doing so they could work with peace, I guess. But they are negotiating with neighbors to see about getting control for ingress and egress. Nice people, I just met them, but they're young and they work hard and they give everything a lot of thought. I've been in that doctor's office since I've been born, and it's like I may end up there the way this is working. But real nice, and I think they'll do a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. I'm Roger Langendorfer, and I'm not quite sure. I own several properties within the neighborhood. I'm not sure which one's within 185 feet. Someone mentioned that there's another property under contract? No. Okay. Two-family versus four-family is a bit different, especially with parking requirements. And I certainly am not saying I'm in favor of or opposed to the zoning. The parking is very important because on busy evenings, we have parking and we have neighbors who have signs, they put cones out, and Sal, if anyone should understand that, you should understand that, and you, I think
Right.
you're familiar. We have commercial property that has become very successful, and we have people parked in front of our houses all the time. I would be very disappointed to find that we did approve zoning for a four-family and there weren't 4 spaces available for the parking. Wonderful building, and when Ike was there and had his office there, he was a wonderful neighbor, and I most certainly would not want to say anything opposing something with a good plan. We haven't seen drawings. Neighbors have come to me, and there's a lot of talk about other things that are possibly going on in the community. There's some rumors that about other projects in the community that are about to be a donor, and some of the neighbors are talking about tremendous amount also of confusion with the 415 address, and I was at City Hall, and I asked, I said, what the hell is this all about? You know,
Yeah, that's why I went and looked at it, because I.
There's no
assumed the
415.
County was right.
So
Yeah.
will there be, before you make your decision, will there be any,
Don't we handle the addressing here? Don't we do the addressing?
We're going to do it by parcel instead of address, I think.
Well, yeah, the approval will be by parcel for the ordinance, but for the addressing, we typically would do that whenever they want to get occupancy, because we have to know how many units it's going to be and what the layout is before we send out a
handle
new.
that in the city.
Oh,
with
yeah,
the city.
yes.
The city handles that address.
Yep.
We don't have to go anywhere else for that.
No, yeah, we do that in the engineering office.
so it could be torn, if we approve this, it could be torn down and a 4-family building, apartment be constructed on it? I mean, it's an Art Deco building, I just hate to see the building go.
Right, and I probably should have brought that up. I just wanted to say that our recommendation on the pad itself, but yeah, no, there has been no indication that that's the plan.
And is R2, because this reads a bit different, I think, than what was sent.
This is R3.
Multifamily.
So has everyone within 185 feet been contacted?
Yeah.
And there's no way that we could keep it 2-family? I don't think there's any 4-family within, is there, Sal? I mean, this,
Not within 185 feet for sure.
this
mean, I
is
don't-
very much a historic, you know, I mean, it's just kind of, there's one 3-family.
Right, I think that one's right next door, or that's maybe a couple
No,
houses
I think
down.
it's
Okay.
down the street a bit.
Now, I do want to point out that even though this is close to downtown, this does not fall into the downtown zoning regulation. They have to provide their own off-street parking, and it's 8 spaces, it's not 4. So they have to provide that before they can get occupancy. So I'm assuming they would have to show, with this drive around the back, some type of parking in the back here. Just so to ease some concern, we would not give them occupancy to and say, oh, look, there's parking in front. They can't count those. They have to show them all off-site.
I mean, from the neighbors that I've talked to, and some of them are really confused, they have no problem with 2-family, but they're a bit concerned with 4-family. So, and I'm not opposed or in favor of, I'd kind of like to see what, you know, if we're going to do 4-family or if we're going to do, you know, so.
Well, it sounds like the initial intent is a 2-family. And as Sal said, if they do go to 4, they'll have to come and show us, because they've got to have those parking places by code. So they would be back, right.
Not to
Not
planning
to
zone.
us, but they would be to
Right,
you.
not to
Yes.
Engineering. And so I think if that happens and it goes up, there'll be somewhere to put them. They'd have to have those parking places off-street,
Yeah, 8 of them.
right?
Well,
It's 2 per unit is what we
And
require.
Sal, to clarify, I mean, if we go to the proposed zoning that's being requested, is there a limit on how many units they could do? Let's say, in theory, let's say
4.
they but even if they tore down the building and built something new, it's because of the size of the lot?
Correct. It's not
Okay.
because of the size of the building, it's the size of the lot allows them. I think the numbers come out to like 4.2, but it rounds down, so.
Okay, so that's the most that could ever occur?
Correct.
Under any circumstances? Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear on
Yes,
that.
yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Roger.
Any other discussion, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
There's a first, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
All right, and so this will not be, we originally had it on for city council next week. Roger, I think you're the only one left. We will send out a new letter for council because they're wishing to wait for the inspection to go through until after that, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
add one thing. Everybody seems very concerned about them preserving the character and look of the building. These people love it. That's part of their
What is that?
appeal to them. And they're already talking about how they're going to do that.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
But yeah, Roger, you'll get another letter on the new date, so.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 5, case number 190305. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat of Lot 1 of Walmart Boundary Adjustment Plat.
Yeah, so this is a very odd name because this was the second Walmart, I believe the second Walmart. That's how it got the original subdivision name. And then it had gone through a boundary adjustment. Back, oh man, I thought I had a date on here when the original one, but that's how it got the adjusted Lot 1 of Walmart Boundary Adjustment Plat. That's the title of they gave it when they recorded it. And now they're subdividing that. They're doing a re-subdivision of that plat. It was too late by the time I saw it. I wish I would have just told them to rename it completely because they could have. But they are breaking out a lot. So Lot A is the major lot here. This is JCPenney's. And then Lot B is what they're creating right here. And it does have right-of-way all the way up to Highway 100, which is what is required by city code. And so it's going to be laid out very similar to how how McDonald's is here. And so this isn't, it's not, they've actually already submitted their building plans, so this is the Panda Express that is, has been submitted. As for the plat to show this, they are showing their ingress, egress easements. It's difficult, well, okay, there we go. That's what the lot's going to look like. I don't know if I can zoom in here.
Never made it to, what's the Italian thing? I haven't gone there yet.
So I can show you a little bit. The easements that are required, because it's no secret that lot is a little bit tricky to navigate, but that is not a city street. None of it is publicly dedicated. And so what we require per subdivision code is that it has its right-of-way access, which it does on Highway 47. You can see they maintain their easement through here as it is today. They just show it going across this Lot B. They actually do have an access easement that cuts down through here to go down to where Ponderosa is. And the only easement they are adding is a utility easement. So that's what this verbiage is here. They are extending, right now the sewer line, I believe, stops at the property line. I'm sorry, the public does, and then JCPenney has their own connection to it. They are expanding on their own cost, the public sewer line. It's going to follow this new easement, going to go into the existing access and utility easement here. So the utility, because we were confused when we first saw the plans why it has a jog, it's because they're making it follow the existing utility and access easements to get to the new site. And so there is a performance bond required on this, even though there's no roads to be built. They did submit a letter, or what did they, I think they did cashier's check. Cashier's check for the cost estimate of building that will be released once it's finished. Their building plans have been submitted and approved by our building department, but JCPenney's, I guess, was dragging their feet on this part, so they're kind of doing it backwards. They got the building permits done first without having a lot done. So we basically had this permit issued with a caveat, planning and zoning and city council approval required first. But they show all the appropriate easements. We don't have any other issues with that. They meet all the planning and zoning requirements as needed, so.
Questions, comments by board members?
2 questions.
Yes.
I always have questions. So.
Yep.
First of all, on the parking, since they're taking a chunk of parking out of the existing lot that is there for the JCPenney and also the other vacant part of Walmart that used to be there now, does that affect the numbers any? No.
Right now, JCPenney's is wildly overparked because they are not utilizing that entire building. They're the ones selling off their parking. So in the future, if they were to come in and ask for an occupancy permit for the rest of that building, they would have to prove that they have additional parking. And if they don't, they have to address that at their time, and we won't be able to give them an occupancy. That has been discussed with them and with Panda Express. Not that it was Panda's issue, but they are aware of that if they ever want to get full occupancy, they'll have to make sure they have enough parking. you remember in 2017, we actually lessened our retail parking?
Right,
So
right,
it was already overparked, and then it even got, so I would think they would still be able to meet it, but they would have to show us that depending on the use that goes in there in the future.
Okay. Second question, the green space between Highway 100 and the lot, is that going to remain as green space? or
No.
is-
So they are going to have a parking lot just like McDonald's. We actually have seen the site plan on this. I didn't submit it because, again, it's normally not required for preliminary plat. Normally, we wouldn't even have it at this point. It's just they submitted them backwards. So it looks very similar to McDonald's. They have kind of a U-shaped parking area here, and then they have, their building, I think, is much smaller than McDonald's. It's like a corner here with a drive-through that goes around.
So then, from the safety standpoint, will traffic look at if additional stop sign is needed for pedestrian traffic, or who has the say on any of that?
It's not a public, it's not a
Not a
public street.
so they can do what they want. Okay?
Yep. So, yeah, the only time I think we've ever had to work with the development company who still owns this is they had, it's replacing this apron. Other than that, because it was damaging our right-of-way access. Other than that, this is all private, and if there's any issues, if there's any maintenance issues, the liability's on them, and it's up to the tenants, I guess, to complain if it needs to get fixed. So, it's not ideal, I would say. Well, we've talked about this. If any commercial development were to come in today, we would, just like Phoenix Center, or where Schnucks is, we'd require the right-of-way. We'd make it our own street to make it much more uniform, so we have control. And so I know that this is adding traffic to that disorganized area, but by planning and zoning code, it meets the zoning requirements. It's got its right-of-way frontage. They have their utility access, so.
Well, the way they did the utility access, I see them making another lot parcel there. That's why I was asking that.
But you're looking for trouble.
Making it what, I'm sorry?
The way they're jogging their.
Oh, for
utility
additional, I
access,
didn't even think of
I see
that.
an additional, they're going to come back to us and want to do another lot there.
I didn't even think of that, to be honest. I was just assuming they were following it, but that makes sense why they didn't want to cut through.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, they definitely, they could do that. So,
Does it go up to where Bank of Washington's,
it lines up right with it. So it's 103 feet wide. It goes right to that apron.
right to that? So, okay.
Yes, you're good. All right, thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
See ya.
Anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this? If not,
We're narrowing it down out there.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Sal, item number 6, code amendment.
All right, this is a very simple code amendment, and the reason you don't even have a packet in front of you is because we're just proposing to add a use to the matrix. So we'll just put another line added, pull it up here. I don't know if we even brought it up here. So we had a request 2 months ago now to have for the possibility of an indoor shooting range. And we had nowhere in our code where that was listed as an approved use. Not that it was prohibited, but then we do have an ordinance that council will have to address at a later point because it's not zoning related, strictly prohibiting the discharge of a firearm on a property less than 3 acres, and it has to be 400 feet, I believe, from a structure. And so that basically completely prohibits the use if someone wanted to do an indoor firing range. That ordinance was created by City Council in 2012 when we were doing annexation to ease the concern of people who were maybe possibly annexing a lot of land that they could still hunt on their property or do firing practice, whatever they wanted, if it was 3 acres and above. I believe the intent of this, and I did bring this up with council before, I wanted to make sure they were on board before we went back with this. The intent of that was never to disallow an indoor firing range or any use of that sort. It was because of the annexation issue. And so to resolve this and to make sure that use is allowable and making sure that someone can ask for that, the proposal is where council on one end will amend that ordinance. That is its own ordinance. It's not zoning related, so we don't have to look at that. But on the planning and zoning side, we will add indoor shooting range to our list of approved uses. And it'll be a special use in C2, C3, M1, M2. And then obviously it'll be approved and planned just like anything else. But just a special use, and those will not be in the neighborhood commercial, just C2, C3. M1, M2. For request, and that way it would still go to planning and zoning, still go to council. They'd have to show at that point, because a special use can also get into requirements for building code requirements. They'd have to make sure they have, didn't even realize this, I guess there's a certain equipment you have to have in a building to collect lead and everything, that kind of stuff. So we would have that review up front ahead of time. But I figured there's no reason to disallow that use entirely in our city limits, and so this was our proposal. So.
Questions, comments? You're looking for a
Yeah.
vote to send it on?
To council, yep. We did post in the paper that we'd like to have a public hearing on this on Monday at council, just to get over with, because we actually do have a user who would like to do this, and they're waiting to see if it passes, so.
There's no further discussion, or anyone else want to speak on this? We'll entertain a motion.
I move we move it on to city council.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item number 7, telecommunication cells.
All right, these packets, it's a long read, so really I'm gonna try and explain this as how best I interpret it, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong.
You got 2 minutes.
Okay. I think the goal is for you guys to have a month to review this. If you have any comments, concerns, think that if we need to add any of our own requirements, I don't know what flexibility we have, because, let's back up. So in August of 2018, the state passed a law essentially considering small cell telecommunication facilities, which I'll pull up a picture of what they typically look like here. They're basically cell towers that fit on utility poles, light poles. The idea is that you don't know they're there. Obviously, I think this is why it went to the state level. A lot of these were being denied on a local level through planning and zoning. So essentially, the state now considers small cell telecommunications as a public utility, just as electric and cable, and it can go in our public right-of-way. So right now, if this, by our zoning code, even though it's small cell, it would still be considered a cell tower, which requires a special use permit. This would remove the requirement to have it be go through a zoning approval, and they could be placed, and this is where I have to be corrected, in and out of public right-of-way. So it can be placed on utility poles in our public right-of-way, but they can actually be placed on commercial property without a special use permit if it's considered a small cell in that case, I believe. But the caveat here, I believe, is if it's in a single-family residential or historic district, you can impose some type of zoning regulation, I believe. So this actually came up about 2 years ago. We had about 2 years ago we had a company come in, actually identified 3 places in town we wanted to do this. We actually put a moratorium on it to study the issue, and then that company got hammered with a lawsuit really bad in Springfield and pulled all their permits and put everything on pause. So then we never really honestly did anything about it. I think that's when it ended up going to the state level and getting considered a public utility. The ironic thing is, it actually says specifically in here, no municipality can have a moratorium on these. So, because I don't think we ever lifted that unless it had a time limit.
It was limited, I think, to 6 months.
Okay. But it does have a definition on size, just so we're all aware. I'll flip through here. The one I highlighted. Hold on. The reason I just wanted to point this out, because the size that they have, I think, is much larger than what we're looking at here. But
I think that's the intent of it.
to be considered small wireless facility, the antenna cannot be more than 6 cubic feet in volume, and then the actual equipment that they can either bury or put pole mounted is 28 cubic feet. That can actually get pretty large, I guess, if you stack it up. It can fit on there, but I think the good caveat is when you flip through here, it cannot, if it's placed in our right-of-way, it cannot be a hindrance to line of sight, to our drivers, or to our ADA capabilities on a sidewalk, which I think would be our biggest concerns on this. And honestly, if we get someone who wants to place these downtown and help our dead cell service in our most vibrant area in town, I'm all for it. But we just wanted to let you guys look at this, and if you have any comments, concerns, we can come back next month and do edits.
Would it also be to enhance Wi-Fi? If you went to
Well, we are doing, I guess we could place our own Wi-Fi on it, because the city is currently working on getting public Wi-Fi downtown for free.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so we could place, because our Wi-Fi are just like cans, like this
Right.
big. So yeah, we could actually, that's a good idea, place it on there.
I just didn't know if municipalities, if we approve stuff like this, if we can participate, if you want to call it that, to enhance.
Would that be considered a public utility, or is this strictly for telecommunications?
No, this is strictly for wireless telecommunications.
So it couldn't be for,
Would not be for Wi-Fi.
okay.
Well,
But
so we'll have to get
it
creative
doesn't
there.
mean, and in fact, we've entered into an agreement with a local company to put some Wi-Fi around the downtown area. And it's on existing city facilities, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's the plan,
I
but,
think one of them is going on this building,
yep, and then there's one going on the H Tower.
that old radio tower down
Okay.
on the railroad track.
I know it's been talked about, I just didn't know where we were at, and if this was
Yeah.
part, it could be considered part of that.
This is,
That would probably make it easier on Wash PC, honestly, but
Okay.
just have to make do.
Just a question.
Yeah, we're trying to get it
Um,
everywhere. Downtown.
So I don't think there's a lot, honestly, that applies to planning and zoning. It more so takes power away from you guys than anything else.
well, with the new law, basically, you're not allowed to regulate these things any longer. This is an attempt to have some regulation that's still permissible, but you have to adopt this before they get in place. So we don't currently have one, but I know Sal mentioned there was one just a couple of years ago, and they were going to put,
Three
one
or
of the
four.
towers was right by the VFW home on Jefferson Street.
Well, they had
It's gonna
three
be like
small cell
40
and one large.
40 or 60-foot tall pole that they wanted to put up, so.
And this does have, I highlighted the height.
Yeah, I thought I saw.
Max height?
Feet.
Well, they have to match, actually, I think, if they're removing a pole. So if they are replacing or modifying utility poles, so if they're putting it close to, if they're saying by Ameren, installed in the right-of-way, it should not exceed greater of 10 feet in height above the tallest existing utility pole located within 500 feet. So that actually helps, because the one they wanted to do was 60 feet, and none of the other utility poles were even close to that. So that at least gives us, I think, a capability of matching as close as we can. But the problem is within 500 feet, our three-phase on 3rd Street here, those are pretty tall. So that's pretty much within 500 feet of most of downtown, so. Mark, what do we have to do for historic, if it's a historic district, it says we can have some type of regulation.
Right, you can still apply your zoning codes to historic districts or single-family residential.
So a zoning,
But-
that means it's a special use permit?
Well, what it says and what it's not entirely clear is you can do that provided it's not inconsistent with the new statute, the new state law. So to be
Tricky.
candid with you, I'd have to go back and take a look and see just what that would permit.
So we probably just adopt something like this, and then if we get one in the historic district, we
Right.
cross that bridge, I guess, when we get there. I mean, it does talk about aesthetically what you can realistically or feasibly make them do. I guess our Historic Preservation Commission could make that recommendation. So, but I'm not really looking for a motion on this. We just wanted you guys to look at it, and then next month, if we have any edits, we can talk about that. And if not, we will send on to council.
Okay,
Homework.
yeah.
Boy,
We've been getting a lot of that. lately.
Hey,
Boy, oh
I
boy,
finished my side of the homework next, so.
you're just trying to goody two shoes over there. so.
Moving on to item number 8, the item you've been waiting for.
Yeah. Quite a
A
while.
comprehensive or master plan. Sal?
So I went through, I know some of you did get back with me. You marked up our implementation strategy, of what you thought we were doing a good job of, what we thought we needed to do more of, or maybe focus on in the coming years. So 2018, the end of 2018 was our 5-year. I'm going to give myself some wiggle room here, because at the end of 2023 will actually be our 10 years. So we'll be, technically, we still got 5 years left. So, not too late. So,
We got to start next year getting ready for 2000.
well, you'll see in here, one of the last objective I have on here that we're doing the worst in is we're supposed to be doing annual updates, so that's what we'll have to work on. But, so we will be starting next year. But just briefly, I'll go through these. You know, we've actually, I think we have done a pretty decent job of keeping our comprehensive plan in mind when we're making these decisions, or you guys, I'm gonna say we, just to make it easier for the rest of the night, but, you know, we use the master plan, the master street plan. We use the future land use map, especially whenever it's something a little controversial. That always gets, we make sure it's in the packet and it's something that we can go back on if there's ever something we're a little bit nervous about making a decision on. We can basically show some backbone to it. But I'll go through these. Transportation and infrastructure. I will say this objectives 2.2 and 2.3. Sidewalks, it's pedestrian and bicycle access was highly rated in our comprehensive plan. If you went through after and before you get to the implementation strategy, there's a rating system, and that was some of the highest rating we got from our public input. Now, the most of this commission can do, other than when it makes recommendations on like grants and stuff we do for bicycle facilities, is require sidewalks on preliminary plats. We have not been doing that. I will say, and that's no fault of this commission, we did recommend, if you remember, the Overlook was the last large subdivision we did. We required sidewalks on the streets, and it was removed by council. So there's nothing we can do about that. The developer came to the council meeting, said that it was too much of a hardship, and they agreed and removed it. And, well, that's as much as we can do, but I think that's where
You're talking about the Overlook?
Yeah.
They removed one side.
Well, we were on the middle street, though. We required it originally on all the streets in it.
Okay.
And now it's just on that one street. And so we do have, I mean, it does look like a planning issue when you're driving through a subdivision and your sidewalks are all over the place. And so it's just something to keep in mind where, I mean, we should be embarrassed about that, honestly. So it's just, when we get future subdivisions, I don't think we need to be afraid to ask for it, because at the end of the day, the developer reflects that cost on the lot buyer, which I know I'm talking out of both sides here because I'm talking about wanting to make affordable housing, but as a sacrifice, we can get it to get another $1,000, whatever it is on a lot, to get the sidewalks we need, even if it's one side of the street, if it's on all the streets, because local access are where most people are walking. So that's just something to keep in mind as we continue to get, now that residential's up.
You know, that particular one, I mean, the cycling and the sidewalks and stuff like that, I mean, as high interest as that is that something that, you know, ought to be really passed on to the city council?
Yeah, so that would
understand that this is what has been, you know, what people want.
Yeah, so I think after we kind of talk about this tonight, and if we maybe get a little this compact and concise, the goal would be to take this as like a 5-year summary, 5-year report card to council on. Now, if you go through the master plan, every single department, every single committee has goals that apply to them. These are just the ones that are to this commission, but I think that's a start, and I think it would be at the first meeting of every month, we have a council workshop at 6. That would be something I would give them in their packet, because it's not a meeting they have to make any decisions on. It's just they collect information. But you're right, it doesn't do any good if this commission understands the importance if it doesn't move forward.
Tell you, the economic importance of the sidewalks and trails, bike trails are
Right.
important too.
Yeah.
It's an amenity, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
yeah, the amenities as far as not only the trails for, you know, but so many more people are walking these days and stuff too.
Right.
The safety for those people to be able to access.
Well, and I know I will.
Access the, you know, like on our end, the Phoenix Park and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, I think there are levels that you can ask for. I think why not start asking for sidewalks, have the developer put it in, reflect that cost on the lot buyer. But we can even work our way down into, okay, well, you got to grade out the right of way. If you're going to build on one side, grade out the right of way on the other side so we can use grant funds in the future to get it in.
Exactly.
Stuff like that we can very easily write into a final plat ordinance.
Right.
So,
I also think we have a challenge with that connecting north-south with Highway 100 in the middle and 47.
Yep.
That if we can figure out ways to go over or under with the state's help,
yeah.
that we should be thinking about that in the future
Well,
to
yeah,
try
I
to
mean,
connect
you
that.
look at West County and how many ramps over and stuff like that.
Right.
Walking across and stuff like that.
I will say that was our pie in the sky for the Bush Creek Greenway, but that was.
Yeah, I understand.
So long term, we would like to see that, but.
Yep. Hey, we got a bike path on the bridge, though.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
walking, so.
Development in concurrence, this is objective 4.4, development in concurrence with the major street plan. Again, I think this always comes into play when we have major subdivisions. We look at if they're actually building new streets and not just minor subdivisions. We always look at how is this connecting to our major street plan. And it is difficult because you don't want to be too much of a hindrance on the, one, you don't want to be too much of a hindrance on the developer. Two, if you have multiple developers kind of coming towards each other, it's hard to connect that. And this is something that I need to work on as well, our staff needs to work on as well, thinking bigger picture whenever we're recommending that because, yes, we know we have these, I'm going to keep picking on Overlook because it's the one we've done most recently. That's brand new, I should say, besides Stonecrest, that's just expanding. We knew we had this east-west connection going between Rabbit Trail and Washington Heights Drive, and we didn't really give any thought as to how direct it was going to be. It said every plat, because we got Bridgewater on one side was given one, and Vic on the other side was given plats. We weren't trying to work together on how this was going to be a collector street between the two. And again, for fire access and everything, it's great to have the two access points, but you're going to be making 3 or 4 left turns to get, you know what I mean?
Well, we got the same thing in Autumn Leaf to Kurt's development now.
Right. You know, it's not ideal.
Through a residential street instead of a collector street.
Right. So I think it's always a priority to get it connected, but it would be more ideal to start thinking, how are we going to require this to be a collector street? Because right now, our collector street doesn't have its own definition. We have to name it a collector street on the plat.
Right.
Say, this is how wide it's going to be, this is how your pavement thickness, and that helps you get it to it. Whenever it grows from there, that you know this is what you need to try and connect to. You know, you're not just going to cap this with a cul-de-sac kind of thing.
Right.
So, again, I think we do a good job of that. The fact that we were able to work with 2 different developers, Bridgewater, even though Vic sold Bridgewater, but I mean, it's good that a lot of communities would have just let them cap there, I think, between the two, and you wouldn't see that east-west
Right.
connection.
Right.
So I think, you know, it was still great. It's just, you know, something to work on. You can always get better. 7.4 and 7.5, stormwater utility infrastructure expansion. Really no issue here. I think we do a good job. It's a similar thought of expanding major utility and water, sewer and water as we go forward to make sure that they know they may not be building a major subdivision, but if they're on a collector, they better have the infrastructure. To be honest, our engineering staff does a great job of making sure it is in there, but we have to make sure we have the easements and everything in place. It's not going to be capped. Aesthetics, I'll go through this quickly because I really don't think this goal number 5, that was put in there. I'm wondering if that was something that was brought up at one of the public input meetings. But reviewing, that's basically about architectural standards. We do have some in historical preservation area, but this actually is separate. We have historic preservation has its own section in the comprehensive plan. This is on its own, I think, community-wide.
It is an odd place to.
Yeah, and so we have not. I don't think we've gotten any pressure to start implementing architectural standards citywide. I honestly think that would be something we don't want to go down, especially since we haven't even attacked it in our historic area.
Right.
But that is one goal we have not even touched, so I put it on the list. Utility burial.
Well, I mean, back on.
Yeah, go ahead.
That a little bit and stuff. I mean, when you look at a shipping container being turned into a building next to somebody else's house, I mean, it's almost like a mobile home parked.
That's what brought up before. Right now, if you can meet the building code, you can occupy it.
Right. I mean, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, some sort of minimum, you know, and like you say, you could almost, like I say, take those shipping containers, and it's almost like a mobile home right next to all your houses there.
I would say if you're going to do architectural standards, that would be an easy one to start with, because I don't think you're going to get a lot of pushback on that. But I mean, you'd almost have to be very specific about,
Yeah, I know, but it's
Shipping
like,
containers.
that's what you're seeing people starting to do, though, too, with your,
I would say and again, we'll get to the end where we'll get some action items of how we're going to address some of this.
Yeah.
I would say on top of that, another easy carrot, if we're going to talk architectural standards, I think signage would be a good place to start. Because not a lot of people are going to because you're still allowing signage, you're just making it look nicer, and I don't think you're going to get a lot of pushback on that. Off-premise signage are wall, ground signs, but yeah, that is something, I mean, all of these are, if something to expand upon, is something we can do in our committee that will be formed, so. Utility burial, just something that this commission needs to keep in mind. In order for the city to achieve that, that is a goal for a lot of aspects, not just for our comp plan, but for our downtown as well. Keep in mind that that involves a lot of platting and replatting and making sure that we are working with the developers to make sure we achieve that goal, which we did on the first phase. It's been great. I just keep it on there. Land use. So 1.1 to 1.3, I think we've done an excellent job. In 2012, we amended our single-family lot sizes to not be a minimum of 10,000 to get down to 7,500 and 6,000 R1B, which is excellent. That is allowing, you can see it, I think it's definitely helped in our residential boom we've seen because almost all of them have been below 10,000 square feet. We amended our multifamily, and that's obviously picked up. We've had our 4th application tonight since we've seen that. None of them have broken ground, but at least they're getting them ready. They're getting their ducks in a row. So I think we may actually see some of our housing diversify in the next year. And then one of those objectives, I think 1.3, is specifically encouraging multifamily in proximity to commercial districts, which really is what we have been doing. If you look at all 4, this is the one that's actually most removed, but even this is close. Most of them, all the rest that we've done have been actually directly adjacent. So I think we've done an excellent job of trying to increase our entry-level housing, which is also a good phrase I forget to use instead of affordable housing. So we can keep that in our back pocket. Just keep in mind to build on that the next 5 years. And, I think we'll be fortunate, and hopefully that'll kind of help our residential numbers or population numbers through 2020. 2.1 to 2.4, future land use management. Again, this is us utilizing the future land use map. I think we do an excellent job of that. This does also bring up a periodic review, which we have not done. Well, I think we quasi do it. The fact that we're using it when we're reviewing it, if we start seeing a trend, we could always start changing. Okay, this corridor that we thought was going to be one thing is now over 5 years become something else. But when we start talking about our review that we should do, it's something to keep in mind that maybe once a year we look at have we had enough rezonings that are going against our future land use map, not in the sense that we're voting against it, but that things are just changing and we should change our map. And then Franklin County zoning request. I know that doesn't happen very often, but if I think it's only happened twice since I've been here. If I get something within 1.5 miles that does affect our future map, future land use map, future road map, if it's a subdivision, I make sure it goes in front of you guys to make an official recommendation. We don't send it to council, but then we give a letter to the county that they can put in their packet. The last ones I've gotten in the past year have been their subdivisions that are 3 acres and above. I haven't brought that before you because they don't even, when it's 3 acres above in the county, they don't even have to put roads in. So it's really just families splitting up land between, trust and siblings. So those I don't bring before you. If it's something that's considered a minor subdivision for them, 3 acres and above. If it's something less than that, within 1.5 miles, I definitely put it in front of this commission.
Sal, I think that when we get into our subcommittee, that's one thing we really ought to look at closely and go out further than that 1.5 miles. So we can kind of see what they are doing.
Absolutely. When we can do that within 1.5 miles. The state statute is what determines what the county has to let us know within 1.5 miles. That is why the county gives it to us. It's not courtesy. They have to notify us if it's within 1.5 miles, because if we have council pass a resolution in opposition to something, they have to have a supermajority vote, or in their case, a unanimous vote.
So to clarify then, we as a city can't ask the county for their master land use plan?
No, we can. I'm just saying we can't,
Change it.
right.
Well, I understand that.
I don't think we can, well, I guess we could, but I don't think we can make them let us know when they have a zoning request, say it's 5 miles out. I don't think,
Or 2 miles out or whatever.
That's true. That's why I read the county's zoning commission minutes all the time and keep track of that but I think in this, for the subcommittee to look at what's further out than the 1.5 miles, I think would be good for
yeah.
us.
Well, and it could be, you're right, not just a broad 1.5 miles to 5 miles. It could be, we could, if we know an area is prime for development, you know, as you go south on Highway A, 1.5 miles is not far enough to where we're getting at. But if you go out Highway 100, you know, it's not, you know, so that's a good point. We could talk about that. Designate areas where we have a good relationship with their planning office.
It's just a matter of documenting.
Yeah, getting some information from them, I don't think that would be hard. We can't require that unanimous vote on
Right,
anything
I
more than a
understand
1.5 miles.
that, but I think it's something that's information we should look at when we're evaluating ours.
Okay. Life cycle housing, that's objective 7.2 and 7.3. So this land use, this is the one that really applies to us, the majority. Again, I think with the fact that we weren't having an issue with senior housing, as we all know. So the fact that we have now made an effort towards the entry level, I think that kind of completes our life cycle. Even the stuff that we're seeing down here with downtown, I think that is helping our life cycle housing because a lot of those tenants or a lot of those owners are opening up mid-size homes in town that have then opened those up for, you know, mid-level home ownership. So I do think we're seeing a full cycle here now that we've gotten our entry level, our apartments a little bit more interesting. So, and then our zoning code review. This is something that I think we've definitely achieved because it requires making sure our zoning code and zoning matrix list of uses is modern and up to date. They are having uses listed in there. You're not often having people come into City Hall and ask you for something that you don't even have listed, which really doesn't happen anymore. If you go through that zoning matrix, there are hundreds of uses in there, and if they're not, it even specifically says use the NAICS code online. And since we added that in 2017, that matrix, the zoning matrix, has been a great help for us. Our realtors love it. They can just go online right here and just find their use, go over. They don't have to call City Hall so many times. Some of them still do, but that's okay. This has been a living document. Obviously, we've amended it again tonight. This is our 4th time, I think, changing this, which is fine. I think as things come in, we weren't going to know all 1,200 uses to put in here. So I think if we continue to amend this over time, we're paying attention. It's good. So, and then lastly, our it's called civic improvement, which I'm wondering if that was supposed to be called civic involvement, but that is what it says in the in the comprehensive plan, because that whole section is about getting the commission, elected officials, and some city stakeholders, civic people involved. But it does say that we should be forming a subcommittee, and that subcommittee should track progress throughout the year throughout the agendas, and then make an annual report to the Planning and Zoning Commission on basically what I just did here. Based on all our votes the past year, how have those fit into our implementation strategy? Which, I know this took me a while to get out, but if we did it annually, or if we, even if we had a subcommittee that met quarterly and then once a year just put everything together, that would not be difficult. So the good news is, it doesn't need to be all of you, so I just need a few of you to volunteer. And I'll get a couple elected officials and a couple community members, and we can get that formed for 2019. But that's all I have. I think it's been great. There were some action items. I know that master street plan, we are still working on it because we haven't heard back from East West Gateway what has been funded, and that funding that we've requested actually goes out to 2024, which is what we need to have on here. So they meet in April, I believe, is when they vote. Sandy, do you still go to those?
East West Gateway?
Yeah, those. I think Darren's on that committee now.
Darren goes now.
So he'll know. They vote on what projects to move forward. So hopefully we'll know here in spring. We've been pretty successful with them in the past, but that would be adding West Main, or West Link and Jefferson Street to our 2022 and 2023 overlays and improvements, full sidewalks on Jefferson, as well as in 2024, I think, was even later, Front Street redesign, which if, I really hope it doesn't get pushed out that far, really hope, but if Ameren, unfortunately, doesn't move on utility burial, we'll be able to utilize, hopefully saying those utility poles are in our way of our ADA new sidewalks on Front Street, and so we'd be able to use the East-West Gateway money to get that down. The TIF is up in 2023, so I really don't want to wait that long. We shouldn't have to wait 23 years to get some of those improvements done, but that'll be Plan B. So.
Questions?
818, that's not terrible for a 7-item agenda. Saying.
I think we're doing pretty good, really.
Yeah.
All in all.
Thank you for putting up with my tardiness in this.
We'll let it slide.
So, Sal, when do you want a volunteer for the subcommittee from this group? Is that something we want to
think that's
discuss?
Yeah, you can start
volunteer right there.
Yeah, you can start volunteering
I
now.
would be willing to
I knew you
volunteer
would.
for that.
I knew you
be
would.
good.
And,
You have time.
I'll make time.
so.
Any
I think if we
further
got
discussion?
At
Yep.
least 2, possibly 3 from here. I think Tony would like to do it. He's not here. We can nominate him.
Okay,
But
Excellent, excellent.
yeah.
and then we'll have it does mention in the comp plan to have some elected officials. So I'll bring it up with council as well. That was probably an additional liaison that we've never the members of the committee.
Committees.
That'll be good.
Any other discussion? If none, I'll entertain one last motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
See, we couldn't get in too much trouble when we just looked at each other and rolled our eyes. But sitting next to each other, we had.
We're too close, we can talk and get
I
something
know,
stirred
what do you
up.
think about that? Yeah.
Yeah.